Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center. And with the 4th of July, our nation's Independence Day right around the corner, now is a perfect time to take a look at some of our favorite American-made pocket knives. Let's check them out. Alright, so for the purposes of this video, I'm going to stick to production companies because there's a lot of fantastic smaller makers out there, both small batch production as well as custom folks that the sky's the limit. We're not going to be able to cover all of them, but stuff like the Hinderer XM18, stuff from Chris Reeve, all the custom guys out there. I don't want to leave anyone out, so we're just going to leave all of them out and just stick with the production folks. But let's start with a classic. We've got the Buck 110, but I've actually pulled the little brother to the 110 right here, the 112 Ranger. It's a slightly more EDC friendly size than the 110 Folding Hunter, and the new 112 Slim versions are even more pocket friendly and just perfect for modern everyday carry. Now as I go through these knives, I'm going to go through a range of price points, and I'm starting on the affordable end. The 112 Slims start at about 24 bucks, and they go up from there into some upgraded versions, this one here coming in about 80 bucks. Now immediately you can see there's some pretty stark differences between this and the classic versions of the 110 and the 112. We don't have the wood handle with the brass bolsters. Instead, in the case of this Slim Pro, we've got black G10 handles that are thinner so that they lay flatter in the pocket. We've also got a deep carry pocket clip, which makes it much easier to carry in the pocket rather than in the belt sheath that comes with those classic models. It is reversible for left or right carry. The handle profile otherwise is the same, and the blade is just a little bit different. You can see we have a straight clip point here rather than the more aggressively scooped out clip point of the originals, but I think that works even better in the modern era for just most of your everyday carry type of needs. We've also got a one-hand opening blade. We've got dual thumb studs on this knife. Opens up nice and solid. That lockback is nice and secure, definitely time proven. And on this version, we've even got an upgrade of S30V blade steel over the base 420HC stainless that Buck likes to use frequently. If you like the classic models, those are still around and they're still great knives, but we love what Buck have done with these slim versions and just updating their classics into a more modern aesthetic. If you'd rather have something more classic though, let me direct you to this knife here. This is from Case Knives, and this is the Tony Bose Tribal Lock with the Bone Stag handle. You still get a lockback like the classic Buck knives, but you have a shape that's more reminiscent of just your standard slip joint or the old school pocket knives, which of course Case is more well known for. This knife comes in about $74, and as you can see, it's very, very classy. We've got that Bone Stag handle, which is, it's just bone, but it's kind of jigged away and carved to mimic the look of stag. And it's also got a little bit of amber dye here. Just looks really cool. And then that's offset very nicely by some brass liners. Now the steel is Case's proprietary stainless. Now it's not going to hold an edge as long as some other things out there, but it really looks fantastic. It takes a really nice polish, and ultimately the mission of this knife is to give you capability, but also look absolutely phenomenal doing it, and it definitely looks the part, as you can see. All right, I'm going to swing it back to Buck now for a second and take a look at their new Sprint series of knives. And like the Ranger before, there's a couple tiers of this knife. The entry level with synthetic handles and 420HC steel starts around 50 bucks. This particular one is one of the upgraded versions, the Sprint Pro, that comes in just under 100 right now. You see a few cool upgrades in the case of this design here. Still made in the USA, just like all of these here, but we've got an S30V blade again. Comes in just over 3 inches, and it's just this simple classic drop point. Well, I say classic, but it's not exactly a classic looking drop point. It's just a very versatile shape. We've got a really cool scoop out here on the spine that does a couple things. It's a good place for choking up with your index finger or your thumb. And on these Pro versions, you've even got this kind of rope file work or vine file work going down there. Adds a little bit of visual flair, looks really good, and also gives you a little bit of traction, kind of like some jimping as well. Now the big news when Buck introduced these Sprint knives was the action. This was their first time that they've used a ball bearing pivot in any of their production knives. And they've actually gone and tuned it a little bit differently than a lot of folks out there so that the flipping action is not as crisp, but it's even smoother than any of its competitors. This particular version comes with these brown burlap micarta handles. Really cool look. We're starting to see this a little more from some manufacturers these days, and I really like it. It gives you kind of a vintagey vibe, but you have all the benefits of modern micarta construction. It's going to feel good in the hand. It's going to feel a little bit tackier when it's wet, and of course it's very stable, unlike the old wood handles of yesteryear. Got a nice pop of color here on the back spacer, as well as a deep carry pocket clip for the right side. If you'd like something a little bit fancier than this kind of rugged looking version, we've also got one that has some red accents and a marbled carbon fiber handle with that same cool S30V blade. All right, now I want to talk about the Kershaw Link. And this is another series that spans the range in price, but this particular one I'm holding right here, dollar for dollar, probably offers more performance than just about anything out there, and really is one of the best bargains, even at the regular price on our site. Although the base models start around the $40 mark, this particular knife comes in at about $83. And for that, we actually get a 20 CV blade. Now, if you're not familiar with CPM 20 CV, phenomenal performance. It's a great particle steel, offers excellent edge retention, but it usually costs a fair bit of money. And by a pretty wide margin, this is the most affordable knife out there you can get with this steel pretty much anywhere. Got 3 1/4 inches of length here and a really useful shape. I always like a knife with a continuous curve to the edge. You see that here. It's going to make it a really nice slicer, especially as you move through a cut. And you've still got a very acute point along with this as well. You're going to be able to pierce stuff, open up packages, or those really annoying blister packs you pick up from your big box store that are just impossible to open. It's going to be no problem with this. Slice through a bunch of cardboard, whatever you need to do, it's going to do it quite nicely. It's also got a nice stone-washed finish, and if any of you have heard me talk about a stone-washed finish before, you guys know how much I like it, because it's kind of a random pattern scratching, essentially, already built in. So once you go in and actually use the knife and put some scratches on it, they're going to blend in, and it's going to look even better for longer, since it's not going to feel like you're really marring up the blade. Another thing to note about 20 CV, in addition to its performance characteristics, is the steel itself is made in America too. So they're not importing the raw material for that. It's being built right here. The handles on this one are anodized aluminum, green in this case, as you can see. And we've got some pretty cool milled relief here. It's going to add a little bit of grip, as well as kind of breaking up the handle visually as well. It's a liner lock, and we've also got a deep carry pocket clip, which is reversible for either side. And buried underneath the handle here, we've got Kershaw's speed-safe assisted opening mechanism, which is a torsion bar setup. What that means is once you start to open the blade manually, a spring's going to take over and finish the opening action, and it's nice and snappy and repeatable pretty much every time. I've actually got another option from Kershaw here, again with 20 CV steel, that might be a good alternative if you prefer manual opening action as opposed to the assisted opening action. And this is the higher end version of the Kershaw bare knuckle. Now the cheaper ones of those start, I think, around the $75 mark or so, and those come with a 14C28N blade. Good steel, but it's not going to equal the edge retention of 20 CV. So for $120, you can get this version right here, which has a black DLC coated 20 CV blade. You've got a little bit more edge, a full 3.5 inches, so you've got even more edge to work with. But a similar blade shape, in fact, similar kind of continuous curve and very acute point. It's also got a deep carry pocket clip, which is reversible for either side. And you may see a few scratches on this one. That's because this particular knife is one that's been in our test fleet for several months. And even after all that care, you can see it's holding up very nicely with these anodized champagne gold handles. One big difference you'll see between this and the Link that we just looked at is instead of a liner lock, underneath these aluminum handles, we have Kershaw's patented subframe lock. And essentially that gives you a full-size lock bar like you would get on a frame lock, except that lock bar itself is anchored into the aluminum rather than being a single part with the back handle scale. And that lets them get that cool color wrapping around the entire knife, as opposed to, just a normal titanium scale that you wouldn't be able to anodize quite like this. But the lockup is just as solid, and then the action, even though it's not assisted, is still very rapid. That's because we've got Kershaw's KVT ball bearings in the pivot. They're tuned fantastically, and I think on the table right here, this might be one of my very absolute favorites of the modern crop of American-made pocket knives. All right, we've seen some bucks and a case knife, so we've had some classic brands. How about another one? We've got the Gerber Fastball here. And although Gerber may be overlooked by some of you knife enthusiasts out there, the Fastball is definitely worthy of attention. This knife, I think, is one of the best folders Gerber has made in quite a long time. They really did a fantastic job here. Just a really solid all-around EDC coming in just under $100. The blade is 3 inches long and it features S30V steel. It's got that stone-washed finish, which I really like. And we've also got anodized green aluminum handles on this knife as well. It's a liner lock. We do have a reversible pocket clip. It's not deep carry. And we also have ball bearings in the pivot rather than an assisted opening system. And they've tuned it really well. The action is quite good. Flings that blade out very easily. That Wharncliffe shape is going to work very well. You've got your excellent piercing capabilities, and it's going to be a really strong cutter despite its smaller size. There's a few different colorways available right now. There's a version just like this that has a plain gray aluminum handle. There's also a black aluminum handle, and that version comes with a blackened stonewash blade if you prefer. And coming soon, they're actually working on some cleaver versions of this knife as well, and that's going to come with some 20CV blade steel, which is a really nice upgrade. All right, next I'm going to look at a Spyderco, and this is where we start to get into knives that at their lowest level start right above the $100 mark. We've got the Native 5, which kind of like the Deka, which is one of Spyderco's Japanese-made knives. This is one of those awesome blanket recommendations that I can make to pretty much anyone. If they're not sure what they're looking for, if someone says, I need a pocket knife, I want it to be made in the US, what should I get? The Native 5 is always one of my top recommendations. This particular one is the Native 5 Salt, which differs from the standard models. First of all, you can see this bright yellow handle, and I'll get to more about that handle in a second. The key story with this particular version, though, is the blade steel itself. They use LC200N. This is a very tough and very high-performing stainless steel. Now, the thing you have to remember with stainless steel is stainless means it stains less. It's not necessarily rust-proof. However, the LC200N here, second only to Spyderco's H1 really, is virtually rust-proof. This could live in the bottom of the river for quite a long time, and you're gonna be able to pull it out later, and it's gonna be in pretty good shape. And I don't say that just out of nowhere. I've actually had my friend Joe Flowers with his Spyderco Caribbean, had that exact same thing happen to him, and I was really impressed by how it looked when he pulled it out. So not only do you get that high stain resistance, like I said, you're getting very good performance here, kind of getting into the arena of some of the super steels out there, at least on the lower end. I really like it. I've used this steel in one of my EDCs for quite a while. Very impressed. Plus, another cool little fact, NASA actually uses this for ball bearings when they absolutely have to have something that's not gonna rust. Now the handle itself has some of those things that makes a lot of the smaller Spyderco knives on the market just so good. First off, bi-directional FRN. We've got nice texturing, so you've got retention in both directions, forward and backwards. We've also got a mid-mounted lockback, which is a very ambidextrous system, and that kind of carries through to the rest of the features on the knife. That opening hole opens with your thumb with either hand just as easily, and we've got a nice black pocket clip here that's a 4-position clip. You can carry it on the left or the right in tip-up or tip-down fashion. This really does work for just about anyone out there. And although the blade itself is only 3 inches, you're actually able to get a really big handhold on this knife. And that's thanks to the finger choil here, right at the front of the blade, which again is one of those common things from Spyderco's, at least on their smaller knives especially, that allow it to fold up small, but you've still got a very full grip, even for larger hands. Now, in addition to this version, there are a bunch of different versions out there from Spyderco, both with different blade steels as well as fancier handle materials, if that's your thing. But this FRN one here is nice and lightweight. But if lightweight is truly what you're after, if that's one of the biggest considerations you've got, you might want to check out the Benchmade Bug-Out. These start a little bit above 125 right now, and for that you're getting a very well-designed knife with a very versatile shape that weighs less than 2 ounces. Now that blade itself is about 3¼ inches long. That drop point is going to be applicable to all kinds of different things. And the blade stock itself is nice and thin. It also comes with a really high flat grind. They really went out of their way to make sure this knife was a phenomenal slicer. Now the handles are Grivory, and this particular one comes in blue. And this was actually the original version of the Bug-Out that was released, and they originally aimed this at ultralight campers or hikers. And the blue was a really good choice there, as it's a very highly visible color when you're out in nature. It's actually a little less common in the natural world than oranges typically would be, which is kind of the color you first think of. But despite that stated mission, I actually think this is even better as a lightweight EDC. Those handles are nice and thin, and certainly the blue helps to keep it looking a little bit less scary to certain folks out there, which is definitely appreciated. And then it carries nice and unobtrusively too, and that's thanks to the mini deep carry pocket clip here with a nice oxide finish that's not going to chip like a painted clip will. That is reversible for ambidextrous consideration, and that also carries through to the axis lock that we see right here, which is another great option for lefties or righties both. Simply pull back on that lock bar here, and you can close the blade quite easily. You can open it again with the thumb studs, or my favorite thing to do, hold the lock bar back, give it a little bit of wrist action, flick the blade open or closed really quickly. Now, if you're not a fan of the blue here, there are a few other different colors available, including one I'm really excited about, their new CF Elite handle, which is a carbon fiber reinforced nylon. It's even lighter, but at the same time, even more rigid than these Grivory scales. It's really impressive. Now, if you want something that's a little bit more premium than the Bug-Out, but you like that kind of size, there's a newcomer from Hogue that I've been really impressed with, and this is the Deka. These start just above 140, and there are several versions of this just like the Bug-Out. We've got different G10 handles, and that first thing right there, you got G10 instead of Grivory, and we've also got 20 CV blade steel. You can get it in the stonewash finish you see here, or a black finish. We've also got two blades to choose from on the Deka. We've got the clip point here, as well as a Wharncliffe profile. Blade stock is roughly the same thickness as the Benchmade, although the grind's not quite as high, but it's still going to be a very nice and efficient cutter just the same. We've also got a pocket clip, which is reversible. It's not deep carry, but on the side you're not using, we do see a little block out plate so you don't have some bare holes in there. It's just one of those nice little features that's cool. Just like its competitor, we've also got an open-backed construction here, so it's going to be very easy to keep the knife clean. And we also have Hogue's iteration of the crossbar lock, their Able lock, which is very smooth. Now, while Benchmade has certainly set the standard with their axis lock, they do it very smoothly and it's very highly regarded. Hogue shouldn't be overlooked either. They're doing a great job with this Able lock. It's got the same ambidextrous qualities I love, and then one thing I didn't mention that's an advantage for this style of lock, when you go to close the blade, you don't have to put your fingers in the path of the edge at all, which I just love that inherent degree of safety that comes with this style. Now, another type of lock that allows that is Spyderco's compression lock. I've got another Spyderco here. This is the Paramilitary 2. I've got a bigger blade than the previous two with this knife, which they were about 3¼ inches. This one is about 3½. It's got that signature Spyderco shape with the high flat or full flat grind. So again, really good slicing characteristics, and then that opening hole for easy opening. But if I flip the knife over, you can see right here mounted on the spine is that compression lock. And while it does have a tab that sticks up into the tang of the knife, you can kind of think of this as a liner lock, just kind of reverse mounted. Fold the lock down or flip the lock down with your finger, and then you can flick that knife closed if you wish, or you can be a little more deliberate, closing it without the wrist action. And then you can open it the same way too. If you don't want to use those thumb holes to do a standard open, you can kind of hold the liner back a little bit and flick the blade open. Like the Native 5, this is another knife, being a classic in Spyderco's lineup, that there are a ton of different variations available out there, including some dedicated left-hand versions, because the compression lock, by its very nature, is a little more biased to a single hand rather than being completely ambidextrous. But we've still got that nice 4-position pocket clip, carry it whatever way you wish. You've even got that finger choil, that signature Spyderco element there that gives you even more reach on the handle. For my slightly larger than average hands, I do get, I wouldn't say I was cramped, but I don't quite fit within the prescribed sections here. It is still pretty comfortable, but it's also nice to have that choil there so you can choke up. Not only does that allow me to get a fuller grip, but also if you're holding it kind of in a pinch fashion there, you're able to get a much finer control over the tip of this blade. As I said, there are a number of versions available, both with different blade steels and handle materials. They start around the $150 mark, and this particular one sits right about there and comes with the camo G10 pattern. And that really calls to mind that in addition to being a great EDC design, with a name like Paramilitary, as you'd expect, this really is a phenomenal tactical knife as well. All right, we're definitely firmly into the more expensive end of the US production knives now, but now let's get into some truly premium stuff. And I'm gonna start with one of those underrated brands out there. They're a bit smaller, but they definitely deserve a look, and I'm talking about Southern Grind. This right here is a version of their Spidermonkey design that comes in at about $220 right now. For that, you get a 3¼ inch blade of S35 VN steel, like 20CV and S30V, made in America, which is quite nice. The drop point blade is going to be very usable. They've managed to give it a pretty distinctive shape, which is hard to do on a drop point, and I really appreciate that. You can see this particular one's a combo edge, but there are plain edge versions of this knife available, and we've got carbon fiber for the handle scales here, although we've also got copper as well as some other options also. The build quality is fantastic. It's not a huge knife in the hand, but it feels extremely solid. We've got a liner lock for security, and this is actually a thumb stud opening knife. You might have expected it to be a flipper. You still can flick it quite nicely, but you're just not going to be able to do it with your index finger. Well, you might be able to if you're kind of skilled enough. You could be able to pull it off. We've got open backed construction here. Again, easy to keep clean, and a nice sturdy pocket clip, which is a right side tip up only design. This particular one here with the carbon fiber and the black blade, I think it's a pretty cool dichotomy between the classy and the brutal, and I really like the way those two work together. All right, now we got to talk about our favorite overbuilt American brand, or at least that's the image they like to project. I'm talking about Zero Tolerance, and this is the ZT452CF. There's a lot of great ZT models out there. I'm a big fan of the new 308, but one of those that I keep coming back to because I love the looks, I love the overall design, is this particular one right here, designed by Dmitry Sinkovich. This knife comes in at the $240 mark, and what we get here is a titanium frame lock flipper, which is something ZT is very heavily known for. Got that solid lockup from the titanium bar here with a nice hardened steel lock bar insert right on the end. And we've got a nice long profile going on here. A full 4 inches, just over 4 inches in fact, of excellent S35 VN steel. The front looks nice and classy too with that carbon fiber. And then the action is unassisted, it's ball bearings again. Now if you didn't know it, ZT and Kershaw from earlier are actually both owned by the same parent company, which is why you see a KVT bearing system here as well. And the action just plain works. I mean, you can hear it over the microphone, just how snappy and authoritative that action is. But if you find yourself wanting to carry a gentleman's knife, but you just can't give up the idea of a big blade, look no further. This is the one to get for sure. Now, if you don't need the full 4 inches, but you still want a very distinctive knife, check out the 940-1 from Benchmade, designed by Warren Osborne. This is the most premium version of the 940 series, and they start around $175 on the low end. This particular one comes in at $272 because we've got a number of upgrades over those standard models. The first thing you'll see immediately that's different than the aluminum or G10 handles of the lower end versions is the usage of carbon fiber. But they didn't just slap a flat set of carbon fiber scales on here. It actually has the same milled contouring that the aluminum models get. The 3.4 inch reverse Tonto blade has also seen an upgrade, a very significant upgrade in fact, and it uses S90V blade steel, which out of everything here on the table, if your highest priority is edge retention, this is going to be the way to go. S90V has a ton of edge retention because it's so abrasion resistant, and part of that translates into the manufacturing process. It takes a lot more consumables and a lot more time to make this blade than even with the 20 CV that we've seen on some of these other knives. As I said, you've got a very distinctive blade shape here, but that's not really going to hurt its usability. This is still going to be a great knife for any of your day-to-day tasks that you're going to need to do. And then of course you've got that nice ambidextrous axis lock, ambidextrous pocket clip too, that'll flip over onto either side. Hold the bar back, flick it closed, flick it open. It's just a really cool design and very distinctive too. Even after all this years of this knife being out, it's immediately recognizable. No one's really been able to do something that captures the same spirit as the 940. I'm going to end things with a personal favorite of mine in the realm of the high-end American-made titanium frame lock flippers, the ZT609. Like I said, one of my favorites for sure. This knife was designed by R.J. Martin, and you actually see one of his signature design elements. We have his see-through pivot design, so there's actually essentially a pass-through running through that pivot itself. Now, does it do anything practical? No, not really. It's just there to look cool. And it definitely does, and it really ties everything together on a very cool looking design overall. These knives run about $260 right now. We've got a 3.4 inch blade with CPM 20 CV blade steel. We've also got the titanium frame, which has been anodized to sort of a rustic bronze color, and a good amount of intricate milling going on that looks really good. It's going to be a fantastic gentleman's knife option, and it's going to give you some traction too when you go to use the knife. Whereas a lot of ZT's titanium frame lock flippers tend to feel overbuilt, and I don't use that term negatively, like that's just what they're going for. This knife feels a little bit more refined, a little bit more svelte overall, and that's just something I particularly appreciate. The action, it's KVT bearings, so it flips open quite nicely. You've got a distinctive and fancy look with some phenomenal materials. You really can't go wrong. Now, I had a fair number of knives here on the table, but in reality, this is just a small sampling of all the great knives that are built right here in America. And make sure to let me know which knives you liked down in the comments, which one of these was your favorites, or what did I leave out? What's your favorite American-made EDC pocket knife, EDC or otherwise? Let us know in the comments. Now, if you want to get your hands on any of these knives, as well as browse our entire selection of American-made folding knives, we will leave links in the description below. And while you're over at the Knife Center, checking out those knives, make sure you sign up for our Knife Rewards program while you're there. Because if you're going to buy one of these cool knives, you might as well earn some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center. I hope you're all staying safe, sane, and sanitary. Happy 4th, everyone. See you next time.